The Duquesne Dukes bounce back from a city game defeat to get a victory over Akron. Duquesne women's team now 2-4 on their season as they head into a holiday in positive spirits. This is a Duquesne women's edition here of Pittsburgh Postgame on Pittsburgh Sports Live. I'm your host, Mike Asti, and I will be joined by our Zachary Weiss of Pittsburgh Sports Now on location there from the beautiful UPMC Cooper Fieldhouse. Zachary, yeah, there it is. It is in all its glory. No matter what any of these teams do, that's a win to have that facility, to say the very least. But Duquesne, the women's edition of Duquesne, getting a victory on this night. And as I said, they do rebound from the city game loss. Maybe, something that they needed to do to get into the holiday spirit here and getting this victory now. 58-47, now 2-4. So I do want to kind of just ask you that. What was different in this game from the city game loss? Because that's a Pitt women's program that entering the season, there's uncertainty there. They're kind of trying to build something back up again. Duquesne kind of maybe could feel like this was the year to snag that one. Didn't happen. But this victory over Akron has to feel good now. And by the result, certainly appeared to be a different game for the Duquesne women in this one compared to just a couple nights ago.
Well, sure, and I think Duquesne viewed that as a 50-50 game, even with the way the team was assembled in its current state, with some sincere injury issues. Yeah. Of course, they had won the rivalry, the city game, 9 out of the last 11 times, so I think regardless of records, you throw records out of any city game and you just play and let the chips fall where they may. And I think the biggest difference was two things, and it was something Dan Burt said after the game, after the city game, that is. The first being just Pitt essentially dared Duquesne to take open jump shots. They didn't really use the paint where they were maybe out physical, and whether that was due to size, whether that was due to fitness itself, or just trying to prevent an injury subconsciously. So they were dared to take open shots, and those shots just happened not to fall on that specific night. And even though they were down 8-0 early, the response still was a little bit of that kind of the same thing. It was a perimeter thing. And I think that's why you saw what the score was, what it was. They just couldn't get over that hump. But they started stringing shots together. Specifically, Laya Soleil in the paint was a huge difference. And once she started going to the glass and was aggressively calling for the ball and using those post actions and post moves where she was being defended in single coverage, it was a recipe for success. And I think Duquesne saw that as a green light. And of their 17 points in that third quarter, 10 were scored in the paint. And I think at that point for Duquesne, it was game on. You saw them lock in more defensively. You saw the offensive plays be a little more varied. And I think that's a really good recipe for them. And in their current state, that's just what they have to do to find ways to win. 58 points at the end of a game, is that pretty? No, it most certainly is not pretty. But given the state of the team, this is what it is right now. And I think right now they're happy with the win. Years past, these are teams that are WNIT Duquesne historically. They made one NCAA tournament. This is a result they probably wouldn't be happy with, but in the current state right now, you have to get wins however you can get them. And they played with a really good mentality in that second half in particular, and that's why I think you see the result you do tonight.
Yeah, Zachary Weiss here, Pittsburgh Sports Now. Duquesne does get a victory after the city game loss there. Duquesne now 2-4, the women's edition here of Pittsburgh Postgame here on Pittsburgh Sports Live for the Duquesne women. You mentioned that bench production. You mentioned Soleil in particular and what she did offensively. But again, as you're talking about, only 58 points on the board, even in the loss to Pitt. 64, I believe, was the output in that game. So even a team struggling early on, they're still able to actually score more, and scoring more in every one of their games prior, actually. So does that give you some concern, even if they're seeing individual production stepping up, that overall as a team offensively, they're actually getting worse each game in terms of the overall points, which sounds easy to say, but that is what matters on the scoreboard at the end of the day.
Points are points, but I think you also have to consider the scope of what it was. And I think you look at a half where, as a team, Duquesne for 3 of the 4 quarters didn't shoot above 37.5%. So it wasn't a point necessarily the offense being stagnant. It was shots maybe not falling. And when you look at the beginning of the game, the first 5 minutes were kind of a little bit of shell shock. They went into that 2-3 zone to start. And Dan Burt said initially they were going to go man because they expected Rachel Martindale, a local kid who was coming back home for Akron, to start. And when that wasn't the case, they went into the 2-3 zone. maybe subconsciously they weren't 100% committed to it, maybe because it wasn't plan A, the attention to detail wasn't there, whether that be a scout or whatever the case may be, but they just came out flat on both ends of the ball, and they kind of got punched in the mouth a little bit. Yeah. And you could easily look at it as this might be a carryover from the Pitt game. Is this how they're going to react? And if that's the case, then it's a cause for concern this early in the young season. But what they were able to do is they were able to regroup. A couple of good efforts. Hallie Bovell with 7 rebounds, which is really important that she's coming back in full health and is starting to find herself. Precious Johnson, maybe not a difference maker in points, but in 14 minutes to pull 8 rebounds. And, of course, Lia Soleil having that mentality. Maya Hamilton bouncing back. It wasn't just one performance. It was multiple performances, which is what a team like this with what they have right now needs. And even still, you had a player like Fatou Pouy who's had a good last few games, but tonight she didn't get it done on a sequence, and the message was sent. The hook was there, and she never came back into the game. So there's still a message that's being sent to this team about what the expectation is. And the goals and expectations are still the same for what they've been with this program. I think last year in a COVID year where you saw a lot of injuries, I think that standard slip, or maybe subconsciously, and this is something Libby Bazelak admitted after the City game, they were maybe expecting to lose some games. They subconsciously, maybe they didn't have that killer mentality. But you saw in the second half tonight that killer mentality in stretches come out. And if that happens, then I think there certainly is room for this growth in the team. And, of course, the team hopes that some of those banged-up bodies, which include 4 players that have seen starting time, whether with Duquesne or with other schools, when they get closer to full strength, or even with this group, as they start to learn together and find roles and gel, then it could be a little bit more of a dangerous team than it is in its current state. And maybe you'll see more of what you saw in the second half. But for right now, this is what you get, and we'll have to see how that translates.
Yeah, and tonight it translated to a victory. And as you mentioned at the top of the show, that's the most important thing. I do want to ask you, because you mentioned it's a little bit of the slow start and the feeling around the program, and maybe it would be sluggish again. And obviously, as you know, you lose a rivalry game, you lose a couple games early. If they would have lost this game, that being an upset in their eyes, this could really unravel very, very quickly. Instead, they got the bench production. They got Soleil. They got Hamilton. They got production from individuals. They're able to get this victory, even though the offensive production overall has decreased. And you're seeing that leadership able to pay off. But what was the feeling around the program and around the girls after the City game loss? Because that's a rival. That's a rival that's 5 minutes away from you in an Uber ride. You're going to take that one. You could literally see those girls at Starbucks and have them brag to you. You feel like you're the better program. You feel like you've been the better program. You don't want to take that loss. And Pitt, they're not going to, feel less about their win because Duquesne getting this victory over Akron. So what is the feeling around the program after that one now about that City game loss? Is that something they're able to just brush their shoulders off? Was that a game that at the time you were kind of worried that, okay, they're taking this one hard, it shouldn't have been an L? Or are they mature enough to, unfortunately, you can't change the past, but they're going to have to move on now?
To be honest, I think that Duquesne feels that it can get its peppermint mocha frappuccinos, but regardless of that fact, I don't think they should feel bad about the loss. You have a Pitt team that's playing at full strength that had 12 players that were on its side, and a lot of those players came into that game in good form, whereas Duquesne is essentially rotating 6 or 7 different players by and large for all intents and purposes. So that in itself, plus Pitt having a good start to its season.
Yeah, they're undefeated to their credit, even though no one expected that, and they haven't been good in recent years. And we know building up the program, no one really predicts the Pitt women to get in the tournament, but 4-0 right now is 4-0. Yeah, they're having a good start to their year, to say the least.
Absolutely. And I mean, especially now that the NCAA has come out with the decision to add a few teams to mirror the men's NCAA tournament where you have a 68-team field, they have to be licking their proverbial chops that this opportunity that they have this week in the Virgin Islands could be a good opportunity. But right now, of course, the focus is on this Duquesne game. And I don't think they're obviously disappointed. And the way the game kind of ended with a little bit of a chippy technical foul situation where there was a ball thrown at a Duquesne player, I think in a sense that was a blessing in disguise to this team because there was no handshake line. And immediately that edge goes back in and you have that natural thing. And I think when you go back to a practice setting with that as your last memory of being on the court, I think that helps you regardless of whether you think it stings or not. I think there is a level of optimism, the defense starting to come around, the offense finding success. Was Pitt's scoring opportunities a little bit easier than Duquesne? I would say yes. I would feel that the offense at the time for Pitt was a little bit more sophisticated and more organized, whereas Duquesne kind of had to scratch and claw to get some of its baskets, which isn't a bad thing. You take 2 points however you want to, however you can, but I think that Duquesne's still learning. I mean, Matt Schmidt was their offensive coordinator for the entire time of Dan Bird's program before this season. He's at Wheeling now. He's in a different situation. So there's a lot more different feeling with Duquesne changing its offense in a time where they have banged up bodies, some of which are working through that right now, most of which are not able to compete. So it's a lot of different things, Mike. And again, this is the time you want to go through those challenges and figure things out. And right now we're not even at the end of November yet, and they still have one more game to close out their month before the rest of non-conference. So there's still a lot of meat certainly left on that bone, says the deli guy. And, there's definitely an opportunity there for them.
I will never get sick of your puns and your way to compare things and the analogies there. And Duquesne's going to be able to go into Starbucks and be able to order whatever coffee they want, no matter if a Pitt women's player is there as well. Pitt's 4-0. They're going to lose a game. They got a tough one coming up actually, and Duquesne's got to focus on themselves. The most successful team just focus on what's in front of them. They can't change the past, so focusing on what is in front of the Duquesne women's team here. Talking with Zachary Weiss here of Pittsburgh Sports Now. Duquesne does get the win here on this night, 58-47 over Akron. Duquesne now 2-4 on the year. Siena coming up Saturday, middle of the day there on the 27th. So turkey will be in their bellies. They will be able to fully digest. They can kind of relax. The tryptophan is gone. They can even party a little bit, get back to business. Saturday, they have a game coming up. What's your keys to that game? What's your thoughts about that game? And then even a couple games moving forward here. Canisius, Temple. We don't know exactly when we'll have another one of these Duquesne women's shows. So what do you think this upcoming stretch can do for the Duquesne women's team?
Well, assessing Siena, right now they're an 0-4 team. They've already had a mutual opponent facing, both teams have faced Lafayette. Siena, of course, on the losing end of that game. And Siena lost to a St. Bonaventure team, 50-42 at St. Bonaventure. That's projected, even despite its stronger start, to be one of the lower performing teams in the conference. So the opportunity is there for a team that's had some road struggles early in the season, haven't put 4 quarters together, and are riding the momentum off a game like this. The opportunity is certainly there against a coach that Dan Burt has coached against before. Jim Jaber was the coach at Dayton, that Dayton team that made that legendary Elite 8 run all those many, many years ago. Not that many, but recently enough that it caught some attention within the Atlantic 10 and kind of put the Atlantic 10 at that point on the map to where it was a 2-bid league once again. So Dan knows probably what to expect from that kind of a team, makes the scouts subconsciously a little bit easier, and you can ride this high from this game. I think that Duquesne found its voice tonight, and a full credit definitely, I think I talked with Dan about this after the game, to defensive coordinator Cherie Lee, who he feels is starting to find her voice, came on the Bird staff initially, not in an assistant coach's role, and finding herself and coming back to the program with a new mindset, and now in a multiple year as a defensive coordinator, and has become more than that to the program. She's become Dan's kind of right-hand coach, right-hand individual that feels the pulse of this team and is able to put a scouting report and knows what Duquesne needs to do to put things together. And I think Duquesne saw that in putting the pieces of the puzzle together in stages tonight. And could that translate on Saturday to Siena? The possibility is absolutely there, but they have to win on the road, and that's been a bugaboo so far.
Yeah, so a winnable game coming up, but nothing guaranteed, of course, and an opportunity for Duquesne to keep on getting better, but they do get better in this game, at least in the win-loss column, which is the most important thing, even though there's still certainly some kinks to figure out for this Duquesne women's team. Duquesne getting this victory, 58-47 over Akron, now 2-4 on the year. They do rebound from the city game loss with a victory and then have a couple days here, including a holiday, to take a break, relax, enjoy their family, the food, what everyone else is going to enjoy, and then get back to action on Saturday against Siena. So Zachary Weiss of Pittsburgh Sports Now, thanks for joining, man. We'll definitely be talking to you again throughout the season, whether it be the Duquesne men, the Duquesne women, or something else.
Well, I got volleyball and men's basketball in Pitt tomorrow night, so maybe we'll talk tomorrow.
Maybe. I'll let you know. The Thanksgiving Eve may take me away, but I will definitely let you know. We definitely have more opportunities here. So again, Zachary Weiss of Pittsburgh Sports Now. Mike Asti. Duquesne does get the victory here. The Duquesne women get on the board with a W. That'll be it for this edition of Pittsburgh Postgame here on Pittsburgh